In this video, I'm going to go over 10 points that you need to know if you're a real estate investor and to choose the right appraiser for your business to ensure you get the right property values so you can keep buying and investing in real estate. So let's get into it. My first point is you should ask your mortgage broker or lender banker if you can choose the appraiser. Now, not every bank or credit union will allow that, but if they do, it gives you a lot more control over who you can pick. First off, maybe you've already dealt with an appraiser in the past and that you had a good relationship with. Maybe they're more a investor-focused appraiser. So they look at things beyond a regular home appraiser for somebody who's just looking to buy their first property. And what I have found is the communication is a lot better. So instead of you going back to the bank or the credit union where you have questions about the report that they received, maybe you didn't like the value they gave to the property, you're able to communicate directly with that appraiser, and it just makes the transaction a lot more smoother. My second key point is talk to the appraiser directly if possible. Some lenders will give you the name and the phone number of the appraiser. And for most cases, I would probably say that's true because when they're trying to set up a viewing, whether it's a vacant property or it's a tenant-in property, which is probably more important, they need to talk to you, the borrower, so you can connect them with the current owner or the tenant so they can get into the property. Now, what this allows you to do is when you are communicating with them, if there's something like special features of the property, it has a pool, maybe you want to talk to them about the income potential that you're looking to do. Maybe you want to talk to them about specific renovations that you want to add to the property that's going to increase the value of the property. You can do that directly. A banker's not going to know that. A banker's not going to try to go there and try to sell the property for you because they haven't seen it. And in most cases, or mainly all cases, a banker will not see that property. So if you can talk directly to them about specific things about that property, what your plan is, the as-is value, look at the as completed value after renovations, and then also just giving them a list of comparables, it's going to give you a lot more control over getting the appraisal that you need to buy that property. My third key point is bring sales comparables. And so what I mean is, even when you're buying a property, whether you're flipping it, whether you're looking at doing a BRRRR refinance out, you're going to have an idea of what that property is going to appraise for or sell at. Otherwise, you wouldn't buy the property. So when you're talking to the appraiser, especially beforehand, I like to preface this where I meet them at the property. So some investors don't do this, but I like to do this because it gives us a lot more control. We have better rapport with the appraiser. And then if we don't agree with something, at least we've had that communication there that we can talk to them. It's not like you're going to influence the value that they give, but it does help where you have an open line communication. So if you're talking to the appraiser, you can show them, hey, by the way, these are the comps that I received from my realtor. So in the last 3 to 6 months, this is what I feel based on what we plan on doing with this property and these types of level of renovation. So they are comparing apples to apples. This is what I feel the value should be based on sales comps. And I just wanted to share this with you, right? So just giving that. And again, if they are a good appraiser, they will look at that. Again, we've had appraisers that say, well, thank you very much. We'll still run our own comps because they have access to that same MLS matrix system, but it does go a long way. And it shows that you are a professional. You are a professional real estate investor and that you're making calculated decisions on buying this property or not. My fourth key point is very important because we actually dealt with this recently. So we had a property that we recently picked up at the auction. So we found it in the paper and we wrote an offer directly with the seller. We were buying it. We're planning on refinancing it. So we're doing a BRRRR, buy, renovate, refinance, and repeat. And for this property, we did a sleeper BRRRR. And what I mean by that is this property, based on what we negotiated with the seller and what we put it under contract, our plan was we felt that the as-is value would be a lot higher than what we bought it for. So we were gonna just buy it and refinance it within 2 weeks and get our down payment back out, which actually I did a video on and I'll link it up below where I talk about a BRRRR that we recently did where we basically got all our capital back and we had to do no renovations. So going back to this point, if you are not happy with that first appraisal like we were, we got an appraisal from the first person that the bank sent out and it was about $200,000. What we were hoping for was an appraisal for 230. That was our sweet spot to get a mortgage based on 230, 80% loan to value, so we would get our money back. So I didn't agree with this appraisal at all because I thought it was a lot lower. And then again, going back to when I started communicating with that appraiser, they never got back to me. They never got back to me. I left them a few messages. So then what I did is I went back to the bank and I said, hey, you know what, this is the situation. I shared the sales comps that I had received from our realtor. And I just told them that I don't agree with this value. It's very low. Also that this appraiser never got back to me because I just had some questions about it. So what the bank graciously did was, they said I can actually get another appraisal, and they actually covered that second appraisal fee. So the first one, obviously I had to pay for it. Second one, usually you have to pay for it again, but again, the bank wants your business. So what they did is they said, oh, you don't seem to be happy with this. So yes, we'll send another appraiser in. So within a week, I had a second appraisal done, and that value came in at $220,000. So not exactly what we wanted at the 230, but it's something that we were willing to work with. So we went and moved forward. So going back to this point is, you don't need to accept the first appraisal that comes in, especially if you don't agree to it. And again, you need to have some merit for that. And for us, we just felt like the value was a lot lower. This appraiser was very conservative. And again, you will find that not every appraisal, as you can see in my example, is equal. Every appraiser might have certain biases when they're doing that. So that's something to watch out for. My fifth point is, when you're doing an appraisal, usually the bank will own that appraisal. That report will be written to the bank. And what I have learned over time is to ask if that appraiser, the appraisal on that property, can be owned by you, especially if you're paying for that appraisal, which you are in most cases. And why I say that is, if you go to a bank and you get the appraisal, you're happy with it, but for some reason your credit, it doesn't work out, and the bank says, sorry, you can't get this mortgage, even though the appraisal is good. Well, then what you can do is you can ask for that appraisal to be transferred in your name, and you can take that appraisal and go to another bank or go to another mortgage broker, and you may not have to pay for another appraisal fee if that second bank or that second credit union or mortgage broker allows you to use that same appraisal because you already did the work, you already paid for it. Now, this is what I have found in our business. It's not always like this that you can do that, but it's worth a try and it's good to do that. And you want to make sure if you can save time and money and costs, it's good. So if you can do that, ask for the appraisal from the beginning to be transferred or to be written to your name so you own it. My sixth point is, I don't like sharing with the appraisal or the appraiser what I bought the property for. Now, this is more relevant on private purchases because what I have found in the past and just dealing with other investors and talking to people is I feel sometimes the appraiser, they'll actually take that purchase price that you bought it for, whether it's 70 cents on the dollar, 60 cents on the dollar, whatever you negotiated it, that might influence their appraisal. So they might say, wow, you really bought it for 180. You know, maybe the value is 180. Maybe it's 190, even though they should go look at that property and see what other homes that are in similar condition sold for. I don't like sharing that if I don't need to. If the appraiser asks, of course, I'm going to be honest and upfront and say, yeah, this is what we bought the property for. We negotiated this. But what I have found is sometimes that number that you're buying it for, it might influence their decision in the value of the home. So what I have found is just leave that information out unless they actually ask for it. Now, if it's an on-market deal, the bank does have to share that. They have to share that with the appraiser and they'll see that on the offer. Usually they can see the offer, they can see what you bought that property for. But on private sales, you have a lot more flexibility in that. My seventh key point is, when you are ordering appraisal for a refinance, let's say it's a renovation property, what the bank wants to know is there's two types of appraisers. There's the as-is value of that house, and there's the as completed value, meaning the post-renovation value. Now, depending on what kind of purchase you're doing, you might not need both renovations, but if you're a real estate investor, for the most part, you do need both types of appraisals on your home. So what I have found is, if I am looking at purchasing the property, of course, the bank wants to see the as-is value is there, that you're not paying way more than what it's actually worth. When I'm doing the as completed value, because I want the bank I want the banker to tell me like, hey, based on my scope of work, the renovations that I'm looking at doing on the property, the appraiser or the bank's going to appraise it at this high enough amount so that I know I can refinance that property within 1 month or 6 months or whatever the bank regulation is, so I can get my refinance and my proceeds back out once the renos are done. So what I do is when, again, going back to my other points is, I like to meet the appraiser there. I like to have a detailed scope of work written out, telling them like, these are the things that we're doing with the property. We're going to add new kitchen cabinets. We're going to redo the roof, the shingles. We're going to do the windows. We're going to do the flooring. We're going to paint it. So again, it makes you look like a professional. And then when you send that to them, you're not just, it's not hokey pokey up in the sky and yeah, you know what, we want to get an as completed value of 300,000. We're buying this property for 200,000. But no, we actually have a detailed scope of work. This is our timeline. This is our budget. This is what we're actually spending on the renovations, so the appraiser can see the value that you're going to be adding there and that it's actually written out. And I like to leave the appraiser with a copy of that. So again, they might take it, they might not take it, but it's good for you to send it to them anyways, so they have a rough idea of what your plan is, so they can give you the correct as completed value based on the ARV, the after repair value of the other properties in the area. My 8th point is, you want to have that property as clean as possible, free of clutter when the appraiser goes there. A good appraiser looks beyond the mess and the dirt and junk all over the house. There is a piece of an appraiser that's influenced by their emotion, right? It shouldn't be, but when they go there and they feel like it's a bunch of trash there, they're going to factor that, right? They might not say it, of course, but it's emotional, right? There's a part of that I truly believe that when the appraiser goes there, they might look at that, and if it feels junky and stuff like that, it might affect what they give value for that property. So when, as a case in point, we had an appraisal done on a property recently, I called that owner and I said, hey, by the way, when I was there the other day and I put that property under contract, I noticed that the grass was tall. I noticed that there was weeds growing on the side of the house. Would you mind just going and just cutting the grass, making sure you just kind of clean up and tidy up a little bit before the appraiser comes? Can you just make sure all the lights are on and it's very bright and clean, the blinds are open, and that everything they can see clearly? If you can just kind of organize those things. And again, I coach the seller on this. I coach the homeowner on this. Why? Because they want to sell the property, right? They want to sell the property. They accepted my offer. So of course they should do everything they can in their power to make sure that that property looks clean. And again, that's going to go a long way to get you the value you want in that appraisal. My 9th point is, again, going back to what I said earlier, is you need to understand the difference between the as is value and the as complete value. Those are two different appraisers. When you are refinancing at the bank, when you're looking at buying a property, you need to ask the banker, are they just wanting an as is value or an as completed value? And again, if you're a real estate investor and you're renovating the property, for the most part, you will need both appraisals, which are a little bit more expensive. But again, that's what the bank wants to know, is what's the value now? And again, based on the as is value, are you buying it under that? And the as complete value, what is this thing going to be worth? They want to see the equity that's going to be built in there, because when you do go refinance that property in 1 month or 6 months or whatever, whenever the renovations are done, you're going to know with confidence what that bank is going to approve it for. So I'll give you an example. We bought a single family home a few years back and we got a as is value, as is, and an as completed value. And so we bought that property for $260, and we told them that we're going to add a legal secondary suite in the basement. And based on the other legal secondary suites in the area, they were selling in and around for $400 to $450. So the bank actually gave us a as completed renovation value even before we lifted the conditions on that home of $420. Now, based on that $420 as completed value, we bought the property. Me and my joint venture partner bought that property, and we were so confident in that purchase because we already knew what the bank was going to approve it for. So again, a professional real estate investor does these things. Somebody who's an amateur won't do these things. They won't ask for these things, and that's how you end up buying bad deals. My last point is look at the appraisal. Look at the report after it's done, especially if you don't agree with it. If you don't agree with the value of the property or value that the appraiser gave it, well, did they compare apples to apples? Were these other properties sold recently? Did they have the same bedroom, bathroom? Was it the same style of home? Was it all bungalows or were they all second stories or 2 stories, right? Look at these fine inner details, especially if you don't agree with it. And then again, that gives you a talking point to go back to the appraiser and say, hey, by the way, I see that you valued this home at $300,000. We were hoping for something closer to $330,000 or $340,000, and this is why. And again, it keeps that communication open. Going back to some of the points I made earlier, is this is one of the reasons that I like to see if I can pick my own appraiser, if the bank allows, and I can just communicate with that appraiser throughout the process to make sure that we get the value that we want. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you really got value from this, consider liking, subscribing it, and I'll leave a few other videos here, or I'll leave a video here, actually, a next one that I'll talk about where we actually completed a BRRRR, a sleeper BRRRR from start to finish, and we got the value from the bank where I talk about it step by step. We'll see you all soon.